Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 50 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm glad that you're listening. My guest today is a longtime footy fan from the United States. He's also a fan that has worked very hard over the years to bring this great game of footy to more and more North Americans. I'd like to welcome Rob de Santos of the Australian Football Association of North America, or AFANA, to the show. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thrilled to have you here. Glad we're able to coordinate and meet up. We had some issues that we ran into a couple of weeks ago, and I'm so glad that you're able to be here. I won't dig into that, but I'm glad that it was able to fit into your schedule, and so thrilled to be talking to you.
I'm real pleased to be here with you, and hopefully we can continue to spread the good word.
Absolutely. This is, I've fallen in love with this game, and it takes up way more of my time than my wife would like me to have it taking up, quite frankly. So I've been over your website, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But it's how did you end up becoming a footy fan?
I was going to college. Roommate was going to college. We were going to school in the day and working in the evenings, and he was a bit of an electronics whiz and got a hold of a TV, and we got a TV, and we signed up for this new fancy thing called cable, and we got this channel called ESPN. And one night we both came home from work, and we opened a couple of beers, and we were flipping through, this wonderful thing, because we now had 20 channels of TV instead of 3.
Yes.
And
kids will never understand that.
And we came across this strange game they were playing, and it's pretty interesting. These guys don't wear pads, and they kick the ball up and down the field. Of course, at first we had no idea what was going on there. But we thought it's interesting, and we started to watch, and that pretty much was the start. And I followed it off and on for over a decade before this thing, the internet, came along, and actually found the fact that I wasn't the only AFL fan in North America.
And there were not a whole lot of options in terms of watching the game, because it kind of disappeared from ESPN after they began being able to expand their library of content that they were showing. So it pretty much dissipated. So how were you able to watch the game or listen to the game after that?
The history of that is that ESPN carried it until 1980 through 1985, and when the merger with Capital Cities ABC came along, and they were gobbled up, and they started to get major sports contracts in the United States, they dropped the sport. And it was off the air, I think, pretty much everywhere for about a year. And then a programming service that fed regional sports networks that were popping up on cable. The service was called Prime Sports, though it had no relation to any Prime Sports around today or since. But it was basically a feeder service.
Okay.
And they picked up the 1-hour highlights program, which the AFL had launched, and fed that once a week. Usually it was running a week or two behind, because the tapes at that point, they actually put the tapes on an airplane and sent them from Australia to the United States, and so there was a long delay between, even for the highlights. And then they carried the grand final live typically every year. It was one of the few things that the Prime Sports offered live, but each network could kind of across the country could kind of sort of take it or not take it.
Okay.
So it was spotty, and that pretty much was the status quo right up to 1995, when the series of events happened that led to the founding of the FANA.
Okay. So you've been following the game pretty much since it showed up on ESPN, and can I ask who it is that you support?
Well, you can, and the answer is I along the way I became a West Coast Eagles fan, and
okay.
Have been ever since. So when they joined the AFL, I jumped on that bandwagon, but I don't. I typically, if you look through, I rarely mention that online, in part because it's important that a FANA appears
Neutral.
neutral and impartial.
Makes sense, yeah.
Because people tend to be very tribal about the clubs they follow.
Right.
And that's really not helpful from our standpoint, because we want to see every AFL club get exposure in North America.
Exactly, and that's why, I've tried to, in the short period of time that I've been doing my podcast, when I see a prospective fan, if you will, it almost sounds like the Animal House, and they're getting ready to pledge, and we've got to give them nicknames here. But when they say, well, who should I support and such, and everybody chimes in, we'll support this team and that team, and I always seem to say, I can't tell you who to support, but I would recommend listening to the first episode of my podcast, which kind of explains the route that I took to get there. But I'm not going to tell you who to be a supporter of, because I don't think that's right for me to do that. So, yeah, like I said, I don't think it's right for me to try to tell somebody to be a fan of the game, so or of a specific team, I should say. So I'm hoping that grows organically with people, because I've seen a lot of people this year that have just found the game this summer with everything that's been going on and the huge exposure that they've begun, supporting clubs that, some people might have thought, well, they wouldn't necessarily garner that type of support. Do you have a favorite player?
Yeah, I think that.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, these days probably Nick Nat.
Okay.
But that's changed over the years, obviously.
Absolutely.
Players come and go.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's great to see him healthy for a season,
Yeah.
and it's, because that the talent is there with him, but it's just been, he's been snake bit injury wise. Of course, the player that led me to support the club that I support hasn't been in a game since 2018. So I know all about that. And now it sounds like he may be moving on to another organization. So possibly. So you founded AFANA, and that's, you pronounce it that rather than AFANA, correct?
We pronounce it AFANA, and that's deliberate. That's
okay.
Very deliberate.
AFANA. Oh, no, that makes sense.
AFANA, because fans in the middle.
Exactly.
And the background was that at the end of the 1995 season, Prime Sports, which was in negotiations to be acquired by Fox at that time, though the process would still take another couple of years, dropped Australian football coverage. And part of the problem, they said quite bluntly, is didn't have any sponsors. Well, they had one sponsor, and it was an individual a guy from Adelaide who was living at that time in Chicago and would advertise to sell Australian football merchandise during the 1 hour highlights program.
Okay.
For which I'm sure he was, as far as I can tell, was only spending about $2,000 a calendar year. But given that the ads probably cost $10 a piece to run, that made him a fairly prolific advertiser.
I was going to say, not a bad investment, yeah.
But when it became known that the coverage was dropped, and that happened through a Usenet group, Rec Football Australia, which was and Usenet chat, boards
right.
were exploding at that point, and a group of us on there had been talking about it. Well, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix this? And two other fans there, Richard Lip, known as KC Swan, and Wade Hinkle. At some point, we were even talking by phone at that point. At one point, they contacted me and said, I think we need to start lobbying in an organized way. Okay, so I kind of became like a newsletter poster who would post updates weekly on what we knew out from the AFL, and in the course of that process, they came back to me and said, you know what? Let's just make this a permanent organization, and oh, by the way, we want you to run it. My initial reaction was, you two are out of your bloody mind.
Well, I did a little bit of reading and some of the stuff that I'd found out about you. You've got a background in radio and that type of thing. So maybe that was where they thought, that you have a little bit
They
of
didn't
experience.
even know that at the time.
Oh, they didn't know that. Okay. They just were. Nowadays, I teach school, and a lot of the kids will do things when they're looking for a volunteer. They'll touch their nose and say, not it. So I guess they probably did that to you then.
Well, they were involved, and they both to some degree remained involved for several years after.
Okay.
But initially we started having a series of teleconferences and other and exchanging blizzard of email, and we got things started moving. At some point, ESPN has started negotiating with the AFL, but the negotiations kind of stalled out. And we were finally able, through a massive campaign of email and phone calls and faxes and whatever else we could do, basically force the two sides to get back together and negotiate.
Okay.
Because what we understood had happened is the AFL approached ESPN at an international television conference. They did a handshake deal, and then basically ESPN went back to Connecticut and put it on the shelf.
Well, okay. That's and this game is and just from the scheduling standpoint, it's kind of primed to fit into a nice niche here in the U.S., especially now with the invention of the recording technology, because it's just the time that the games are on.
Well, and at that point we were just concerned about getting a 1-hour highlights program back on the ESPN.
Okay.
Our goals are pretty modest at that point. The idea of having live coverage like we do now was a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And anyway, the organization was eventually founded in December 1995, so we're coming up on our 25th anniversary. And it's evolved over the years, but we've always been focused on a couple of things. We've been focused on the fact that we're about the fans, and alongside that means we're about growing the sport's fan base, providing increasingly better TV coverage and access to the game. And focused on that. We have never had any intention, now or in the past. Yeah, we never got involved, nor we have ever had any interest in getting involved in the on-field side of organizing the sport.
Okay.
At the grassroots.
Okay.
The USAFL came along. We left it up to them pretty much, and we had our lane and they had theirs, and over the years, we've had varying degrees of cooperation with them based on, whatever our relative needs were. And the relations are pretty amicable although we don't really coordinate from a management standpoint.
Right.
Unless an issue comes up that we both feel we need to work in concert on. But, we've been very focused on and our lesson in this was taken from the fact that, in the 1970s, soccer had a brief explosion in the United States, late 70s.
Yes.
And basically it died. And the heart of the problem was that they had a great product and no fans to pay to support that product. And we looked at it and said, well, if Australian football ever gets to become a widely recognized sport in the United States, we don't want that to happen. So we set about from the beginning saying we have to build the fan side of the sport. Yes, playing on the field and what the USA AFL does is very important. How many people who watch NFL football on a Sunday ever played professional football?
Right.
From a rating standpoint, they're insignificant. They just don't matter. What matters is that millions of people who enjoy the sport enjoy watching the sport, and I think likewise we kind of looked at that and said what we're going to do. So we actually set out our first business plan was a 30-year plan.
Wow.
To bring the sport in 3 decades, because we estimated that's how long it would take, to the point where most sports fans in the United States would knew what it was. Sports writers would recognize it and be able to distinguish it from other sports and those sorts of things. And we laid out those goals, and I'm rather pleased to say that I think we've made, I don't know if we'll make every goal that we set out 30 years ago and 5 years from now, but I think we've come far down the road, And to get to the point where we have virtually every game live in one fashion or another across the United States is, we're so far removed from us just wanting, 1 hour of highlights on a 10-day delay.
Yeah, and which, if anything good came out of this pandemic this year, I think that has helped, with the game, and with ESPN now, deciding to get back involved, and FS1 and FS2 getting on board and broadcasting all these games. That the pandemic has really helped to, give starving sports fans something to watch. And I don't know how closely you monitor things on Twitter, but it's been amazing seeing the number of fans that have just kind of crept out of the woodwork, like, what the heck is this game? And it's been fun. It's been fun to watch this. So I will not start the rumor that a fan started the pandemic. I will not do that in order to meet this goal. It's not.
Well, I will tell you that what happened here was, as I pointed out to other people, was we had worked for decades to position ourselves, and what the pandemic did is simply pushed the door open and accelerated the process by a few years. But we had worked for a long time. A lot of people say, well, why wasn't it on Fox Sports 1 and 2 before? Well, first of all, the primary network for this, Fox Soccer Plus.
Right.
Contractually. And Fox Sports 2 and Fox Sports 1 were simply fallbacks. And we managed a few years ago to convince Fox that it was worth it to put 1 or 2 live games on a week on Fox Sports 2.
Well, that's how I discovered it.
Yeah. So that, and we pretty much Fox or ESPN or now Sirius XM, or I'm always in communication with these people, and we try to communicate directly to the programming departments, because in general, we found that the people who really know what's going to air and when it's going to air are the programming department. It's not the PR department. It's not
right.
It's not their media shills or anybody else. It's the and also, they've learned over the years at all the networks, because we have pretty good contacts, in the management chain at all of them, that we're trustworthy, reliable. We'll bring issues to them, and we'll bring complaints when it's warranted, but we aren't going to just bug them mercilessly. And in effect, if you look around, you will not find. Now, this season's been kind of odd, but historically, Fox is willing to give us two or 3 months worth of schedule plans. Most media outlets get 10 days or 2 weeks. Max.
Okay.
And that's again a reflection of the fact that they have trust and confidence in us. And when we heard ESPN was gonna pick up a couple games that Fox wasn't every week, really within hours, I had sent a message to one of the vice presidents at ESPN and said, okay, we're going to want to make sure we get these on our schedules and in our publicity. Tell me who to talk to. And the individual there, I'm not going to name because it was, conversation was
right.
But he basically said, talk to this person. I'll send the word, and we got, by Monday afternoon, because this also kind of came out late in the previous week, we had schedules, we had information on what their plans were, all of that, and it was, and again, that's the history we've built up over the years. So we're all about trying to get that information out, because it's the only, we think it's important. If you want to build fans, you need to know when and where to find the game.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll watch the Cleveland Indians from time to time on the Fox Regional Sports Network here, Sports Time Ohio. And I cannot recall ever seeing an advertisement for a footy game on there. And that's another Fox channel that you would think that they would maybe take advantage of doing that with.
Well, one of the issues that the game faces, and it will continue to face for the foreseeable immediate future, let's say that, is that the broadcasts in the United States do not have a named sponsor. In addition, because the ratings for overnight, principally for a lot of the overnight broadcasting, if it's even rated at all, and Nielsen typically doesn't rate anything after 1 a.m. before 6 a.m. Eastern,
Okay.
and the comparable time slots on the West Coast. Because there's really no ratings except for the games that are very early or run into the morning, it is difficult to sell advertisers on getting behind a sport when when it's hard to tell them how many people that are watching.
Well, and also the fact that if people are not watching the games live and they're recording the game, they're fast forwarding through the commercials.
Yeah, so it's so that fans, because that's been a bugaboo for a long time. So why can't you get games on ESPN and Fox Sports 1 and et cetera, et cetera? And so the answer is very simple. They have better rated and better sponsored programs for those slots. And while as a footy fan, I think it's the greatest sport on earth, it is a mistake to assume that the programming directors at any major sports network think that way. They may like it. They may think it's a great visual product.
Great point.
But where are the sponsors? And that's
Great
the one
point.
thing we've harped with the AFL for years is until you get a major sponsor behind it, you can't do much. So I told a fan about 10 years ago, I think at least, somebody said, why don't you just go to ESPN and talk to them? I said, look, if I had a sponsor in my back pocket, I could get a meeting in Bristol tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense because it's all about the money, and if, like you said, that FS1, FS2 is going to get better ratings, showing a 6-year-old boxing match or guys playing poker.
If the ratings are the same, why should they bother going to the trouble of doing something else? What the pandemic did for us, though, was because we'd worked hard and positioned ourselves right, when the NFL resumed, we were positioned perfectly so that absent, a lot of other competing sports, for us to get, for Fox to move that coverage off, the live coverage off Fox Soccer Plus onto Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports 2 and take advantage of the situation. Now, I can't predict what they'll do next season. What I can say is that I believe, we've landed on the beach.
Good way to put it. That's a great way to put. As a social studies teacher, I get what you mean there.
Yeah. So email with Fox and with ESPN and get some feedback of how they felt things went and what they think their view of the future is. How much of that I'll be able to put out publicly, I don't know. You never know, because sometimes they'll tell me things off the record. But I think in general, I will communicate with them about that.
Okay.
Hopefully, it's established enough of a presence and audience that next season will come around and we'll continue to have at least some games on Fox Sports 1 and ESPN will want to continue.
Right, and the rub there would be with the Fox Soccer channel, if they're still airing the games there. I mean, that's an additional pay service that they have right there. So, Fox is not going to, if people are seeking out the footy games, if they can get them to pay for that service, then they may be bringing in more money with that than they would be through advertising. So they might be reluctant to take games off of that.
Well, what they've done this year is they put all the repeats on Fox Soccer Plus.
Okay.
And I think this kind of model is what I'd like to see going forward. It's just the question is going to be when they have a normal complement of all the U.S. sports in front of them next March. What are they going to do?
Yes, that's I think we're all holding out hope for that, and that's why you may see a big rush for people getting international memberships, which helps that individual person.
Well, yeah. We do through our web. I mean, one of our primary fundraising methods, aside from donations from fans, because that is principally how we we pay the bills is
Okay.
fans who make donations to us. But the other principal source, because web advertising isn't worth anything anymore, is to is for fans if they subscribe to Watch AFL through the links on our website.
Okay.
That gets us a commission, and that money is actually very, very important.
You were talking about people subscribing to the Watch AFL app through a Fana.
Yeah. I mean, if they do that through our website, it generates a commission for us, and that revenue is kind of important because the operational costs of the website are really significant, and we need that's kind of how we that and donations from fans are how we pay the bills. I mean, a Fana is not a hugely expensive organization to operate because most of our people are volunteers, but we do a lot of things. I mean, besides the TV schedules, we have AFL media credentialed staff in Australia, who in normal years we would have reporters and photographers at several AFL games each week.
Okay.
They file that content on our website, and the articles are all original content. And they have AFL credentials. I mean, they can attend press conferences. They do all the things that they can do, but they're volunteers.
Now, are these?
Really wish I could pay them, but
are these people who are actual journalists who are working, say, with their company in Australia, but then in addition to that, they're also filing stories or filing copy with a Fana as well, or are they doing that exclusively?
No, these are typically what we do is we recruit someone who'd like to get into sports journalism.
Okay.
Is a good writer, because we've typically always had on our U.S. staff a professional editor most of the time, and we're looking for a new editor now. But I mean, we have people, professional journalists here, who'll do the editing and copy editing and those sorts of things. But they're volunteers. Most of them all have day jobs, and they may range anywhere from their early 20s to their 40s or 50s. But they have press passes and all the things they need to do their job, and the AFL has over the years been very supportive of us getting that, because for many years we were the only non-Australian media present at AFL matches.
Oh, well, that's good to know. I mean, that at least helps to demonstrate that there's an interest here, that with what you're doing with bringing those writers and reporters into the press conferences and such. Now, do you get feedback from the AFL itself? I mean, do you have contacts within the organization that you reach out to?
Yeah, we do.
Okay,
we do. Most of the time we're dealing with the broadcasting and commercial operations folks, because we obviously have little need to directly interface the football side of the
correct, right
operations. But yeah, we've had a long ongoing relationship with the AFL media office, so that typically we can bring issues to their attention. Now it doesn't mean to do anything about it, but at least we have an avenue, and that's one of the things we've also done over the years is we try to be advocates for fans. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not, but we have an opportunity to do what an ordinary fan, you can go onto Twitter and you can complain.
Right.
My guess is nobody's paying attention.
That's probably true. Yeah.
But if I need to get a message to the programming department at Fox, or I need to send a message to the media office at the AFL, I have direct contacts there. I can do that. And we've worked hard over the years to build that history up, so that this season, because there's been the media restricted even in Australia to attend matches, has been severe. We haven't been able to get our staff into games down there very much this season because there just aren't any there aren't any slots in the media boxes. They have, after the AFL brings in the Australian TV and press and media, they're just not, with the distancing and everything else required, there's no place to sit.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, and it's it's definitely quote, their game, so they're going to definitely give their, the reporters that are their priority, that are reporting to their agencies. So it's great that they've been able to accommodate you, and that you've got that wonderful relationship there. But about 60% of the people who listen to the podcast are in Australia. So what do you think that the average Australian footy fan should know about AFANA?
They should know that we're one of the longest continuously operational fan-oriented sports organizations in the world now, and that we are actively trying to market and promote the sport here. What we don't have, and what Australians can help us with, is either by donating to support what we do, or by providing push to the AFL to make a marketing commitment here. Because I can tell you exactly what the AFL's marketing budget in North America is.
I'm going to guess it's probably not much, maybe $5.
Zero.
That was close.
Yeah, you were real close.
Yep.
And until that changes, it's going to be hard for us to do what we can do. Because I've told the AFL many times over the years, you do not have to commit $1 million or something a year to the market here. But if you committed even a few tens of thousands of dollars to this market every year,
mm-hmm.
or even in my wildest dream, a couple $100,000, you could have a tremendous impact. I would like to be in a position where, I could get on a plane, fly to Bristol or New York City or whatever, or at Los Angeles, and sit down in front of the folks at those organizations, ESPN, Fox, or other U.S. media, and say, we have a great product here. We can provide you expertise and support, and we'd like to get this better exposure on your websites, we'd like to have more clips of AFL matches in your Sports Center and all those sorts of things. But without a marketing budget and sponsors and support, we're simply waiting for something to happen organically, and it will probably eventually. But
do you think that? And I kind of lost my train of thought here. Do you think that the game would be served if they were able to regenerate that 1 hour highlights program, and it could even be like a once a week thing on a Tuesday night after that round has been played, to spark interest? If they could get it into like a primetime hour or something like that.
It might. I mean, but what we'd like to see at some point is we'd like to see something along the lines of an AFL 30-minute AFL show produced in North America,
mm-hmm.
With a mixture of American, Canadian, and Australian guests and hosts. And we think that something in that vein, not only just talk about, the matches that have been played, the latest, news, and whether it's trades or injury, that sort of thing. But I think if you think about it, it's, if I was pushing an American sport in another country, particularly a non-English speaking country, I want to hear voices I understand, that have my accent, that sound like me. And this is no disrespect to the Aussies, and we would certainly want Aussies to be involved. But I think ultimately, to sell the sport to Americans, it has to be sold by Americans to them.
Yeah, and that makes a good point. That's a great point. I've been able to kind of tune into every accent that I hear on television except for one. I have one person's voice that I still have a hard time deciphering what he's saying, and that's Gary Lyons. I just really struggle with picking up his accent. It just
Yeah, he's not particularly easy to understand.
He's I'm glad I'm not alone on that, because he's really tough to figure out, and he's got great insight, and I really want to understand him. Yeah, so you say you got this great relationship with these with the networks, and to me that's fantastic. Have they ever brought up the idea that when they're playing footy on FS1, FS2, and either the game gets over, it ends, or it's getting ready to start, there's like a 20-minute highlight clip of rugby with techno music in it that they play. It's a completely different game, and I think having watched that, it might throw some fans off and get them thinking, well, maybe this is rugby that we're watching.
The chronic problem with the telecast has been for a long time that Fox will cut off the live feed prematurely. Sometimes as soon as the final bounce, sometimes in the interviews, sometimes they'll cut it off before you see the song in the locker room.
Right.
And this is an issue we've taken to all kinds of levels at the AFL and Fox multiple times over the years without much success. It may get better for a week or two, and then it's right back again. And I have a variety of theories about what's driving it, though I often wonder if some of it is simply they're incurring a cost with that live fiber optic feed to get the signal over, and somebody on one end or the other is simply pressing disconnect.
Well, that makes sense. Or are they trying to stay within the blocks of time that they have set aside for some of that pre-recorded programming?
Well, I think a lot of times it is. They you always have an issue with a live broadcast that it will underrun or overrun the time slot it's given.
Right.
And I think that's always an issue. But I think that's something that comes with the territory. If you're showing live sports, you have to do it. And as we pointed out to the AFL more than one time, for some reason the NRL doesn't seem to have this problem. So
well, let's be honest. NRL players look much more imposing than footy players. So, I mean, I'm not gonna do anything to upset a rugby player. I know that.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to add too much levity there. Sorry about that.
No. So we're aware of a lot of those issues. One of the things we always have to caution fans is that, we have leverage, but only to a point.
Right.
And that, we had a fan who got very upset with us early in the year because he was complaining about this very issue. And on Twitter, and I basically said, you need to step back, give us a couple of days, to talk to people, and we can't promise any results, but we'll do it. But it was Saturday, and he didn't want to wait. He wanted it fixed now. Well,
there's nothing to fix on the weekend.
There are situations where in an emergency, I could find a way to get to somebody at Fox to say something has gone sideways.
Okay.
But this isn't an emergency. That isn't an emergency. It's simply what I think is a bad practice of cutting off the feed prematurely. It doesn't, it doesn't rise to the situation like you're in the middle of the grand final and the signal suddenly dies. Yeah, that's a disaster.
Similar to, I don't know if you caught the footage at the end of the that was on Twitter at the end of the Cat Swans game where Mr. Enright's daughter, I believe it was, turned off the television.
Yes.
That was one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. Just watching the reaction of the kids, like, wait a minute, what happened here?
So we also understand that a lot's changed. I mean, when we started AFANA, there was a point in time where we staged a telephone and fax campaign, email campaign against ESPN so bad that we basically shut their switchboard down for a day.
Wow.
Now, you could do that in the mid-90s. I had an ESPN vice president once call me at 9 o'clock in the morning and launch into a 10-minute tirade about how fans were clogging his email with complaints and make it stop. And my reaction to him was, well, the internet's a two-way street.
Yeah,
if you started talk, if you gave us information, started talking to us, we can impact this. If you refuse to acknowledge us, well, that happens. Now, fast forward to 2020, these media organizations are far more savvy than they were 25 years ago. Boycotts, fan campaigns, things like that have a much higher bar to reach now in 2020 before you're going to get somebody in management at a major sports or media organization to pay any attention.
That makes sense, and although there's also the flip side of that, though, is that if you can get enough people riled up about something, that the social media that's out there can cause something to trend, which can negatively impact somebody, whether it's ESPN or Fox or the company that makes Cheerios or whatever the case may be, that can impact that company almost instantaneously. So so I think in some cases, then that there's that threshold.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true, and but we also have to understand that if you're I've witnessed the amount of abuse we've gotten for various things over the years at different times when we posted things fans didn't like or didn't want to hear. I've witnessed, a recent episode involving another organization, involved in footy and those sorts of things. People are also less restrained because we always emphasized, even back in the 90s, that your messages need to be polite, respectful, don't use curse words, don't make it personal, those sorts of things. But it's a really tough road to hoe these days because people feel very unrestrained. So we in general have moved away from, except in very unusual circumstances, pushing mass fan action as a way to move the AFL or Fox or ESPN or anyone else, just because we think that the right way for it to work.
Yeah, you think it's not the right way. Okay, yeah, it makes sense.
And we just don't see that very often.
Yeah, and of course that old adage about honey and vinegar. Even though the honey may not do anything, in the long run, it's probably still the better direction to go. Now, what kind of web traffic do you get? Without getting into numbers, I mean, are you getting huge amounts of footy fans here in the U.S. that are checking out the website, that are interacting with your organization?
We've seen a significant jump in web traffic this year.
Okay.
And we're seeing and because we all, like, for example, if it's difficult to gauge all the different tools because you have to kind of look at them in total, but we have the direct traffic. People come to our website to see this, to look at the TV schedules, but we also make those schedules available on Google Calendar. So a lot of people just subscribe, and when those are updated, their phone or mobile device or even desktop picks up the updated schedule change and all of that.
Right.
We see a lot of that traffic. We've seen a lot of traffic this year on some of our feature articles. So and we've in general seen that over the 25 years, because we had our first web page up in 1996. You can still find some of the early ones out on the Internet Archive if people want to go look and see what
they can find. Old, like, cached pages out on the Internet Archive if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see what our webpage looked like in 1997, the Internet Archive has some of that stuff saved. But what I was saying is, over these decades, we've seen pretty much a steady year-over-year growth in web traffic. So that numbers this year were particularly in the March-April time frame. We saw a massive peak because typically it's kind of we have a peak in the spring, and then of course, and it slows down a little bit in June and July, and then we have a big peak in late September. Well, this year it's going to be late October, but
Right.
yeah, when we've seen the traffic increase, we've seen the increase of traffic on Twitter and Facebook. So there's no doubt that we brought on board a lot of new fans this year.
And that's fantastic. And I'm thrilled because it's, and I love, seeing the stuff that you guys have on your site and reading the things that are on your site and recommending it, because it's you have a vast amount of information that's there, and you guys know this game better than just about anybody else in this country.
And we have a great writing staff too. I mean, because I think a lot of people, because I'm the kind of face of the organization, nominally, President Pat Kelly is in charge of day-to-day operations, but we have writers in a couple cities in the United States. We have a staff down in Australia. We have specialized staff who help me with TV schedules and radio schedules and those sorts of things. Because, for example, another thing we do that a lot of people don't even realize is if you want to bypass the AFL website to listen to the audio of footy matches, we have audio players for that specific purpose linked off our AFL radio page.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I mean it's so that you can you can either get the direct link and plug it into your phone or other device, or you can click, and we've got a HLS compatible player which if there's actually a match feed for that station going on at that time, it'll pick it up and you can listen to it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay.
So, yeah, there's a lot of, plus all our pages on what footy's about, introduction to footy, all of that stuff.
Yeah. So, in the great grand scheme of things, if you boil it all down, overall, I think it's safe to say that you're happy with where Afana is. You're happy at the moment where the game is going into the future.
I would say I'm comfortable with where it is.
Okay.
There's always more to do.
Right.
I remember telling doing some radio interviews in Australia, long time ago, and one of the things I pointed out repeatedly was that, if the AFL had a 1% share of the sports market in the United States, the 1%, if they had 1% of the U.S. sports market, just because it's an easy figure to work with, that revenue would exceed their Australian revenue.
So do you think that once the league stabilizes after the financial beating that it's taken this year, and they've taken out the loans to keep the season going, do you think once they've begun to stabilize a little bit, that they might recognize that and realize that this is it's a tapped resource, but it's not or a tapped area for revenue and that type of thing, but it's not tapped as efficiently as it could be?
Well, I think they're way short of tapping their potential here. But again, it comes back to, are you willing to commit some marketing and resources to this? Is it something you have a commitment at the AFL at the highest levels to do? In 25 years, I've never seen that. Maybe it changes. I think there's still a perception in large parts of the Australian, both in the AFL and the Australian media, that the people watching the games over here are Aussie expats.
Oh.
And yes, Aussie expats do watch the games over here when they can. But the vast, overwhelming audience here are Americans and up north Canadians. You don't, and the expat audience tends to be transient. They come and go. Their future here is and always has been building fans in the United States and Canada, and because those people are going to be your fans for a lifetime. And and that's where the financial potential is. That's where the other things are. People say, well, can we get an AFL match here? I would love to see that with a couple provisos. One is it can't be announced 2 months beforehand. It has to be a commitment the AFL makes 10 months to a year in advance.
Right, because they mentioned the possibility of the Giants and the Bombers coming here next year.
But there's no firm commitment for that.
Okay.
They need a firm commitment. They need a marketing plan. They need to put it in a place where more than a couple thousand people can see it.
I was going to say they need a place to play.
And they need a commitment from Fox or ESPN to televise it live.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning. There's a whole list. Most recently in 2006, I think.
Well, they as you were saying, they needed Fox and ESPN to televise it live, because one of the and this is like a small pet peeve that I have, and I don't watch ESPN too terribly often, but whenever they talk about footy, they seem the guys who are on regularly on SportsCenter, they almost seem to mock the game and make fun of it, and it's just they don't give it the credit that I think it deserves, and that just really grinds my gears.
And I think that's a lack of respect and recognition of it as a sport. It's also a reflection of their ignorance and understanding of the sport. Over the years there have been some media people over the years who have reached out to us and said, get me up to speed on this. But by and large, a lot of times you don't get that. And yeah, you're right. There tends to be a condescending or mocking attitude. It is, or the only thing they want to show is this clip of a spectacular collision between two players.
Right.
And I often have to, a lot of times you get fans saying, well, this, these guys are nuts. They must all have, have concussions every day and broken bones and everything else. And I point out to them that, if all you saw was a bunch of YouTube clips, you might come to the conclusion this is the most violent sport on the planet.
Right.
You'd also be completely wrong.
Yeah, I mean there are violent components to it, most certainly. But it's when it's free flowing, it can be like soccer on roller skates.
Yeah, it's spectacular.
Yeah.
And you ask about you ask about seeing games. I have been to Australia multiple times, and I have been to AFL matches. And had the great fortune back in 1999 of actually attending a grand final in person.
Wow. I don't know who won the 99 grand final, so
well, it was if I recall, it was North Melbourne defeated Carlton.
Okay. That's So, what for American fans who are watching the game? Now you were at the MCG for that, of course, but what's the experience like in a setting like that? I mean, I'm sure you live in Columbus, Ohio. You might have been to an Ohio State game, so comparable, number of people in the stands, but.
Yeah, but the difference at the MCG is because the field is so large. The stadium, it's difficult to appreciate the size of the interior of that stadium. The MCG is.
You dropped there when you said it's difficult to appreciate the size of the
sheer size of the. And in general, full size cricket stadiums tend to be very, very large.
Right.
And footy right along with it. So there, it was, but as an experience, it was unique. I think fans were every bit as passionate as you'd expect it. They would be, an American sports venue. It's just, I think the first impression I have, first time I ever walked into the MCG, and it was, not during a game. I was taken over there to get a tour, and to meet some AFL people. And I remember walking in there and going, this place is absolutely massive.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I and some of the message boards from some of the different teams online where fans who are in the stands will post photographs from their vantage point at the game. And I truly appreciate that, because it gives you a whole different scope of what the grounds look like from what you see from that overhead camera during the course of the game. You get to see, you can see from, down at one of the wings just how much it opens up. And I get the dimensions. I know how big it is, but just actually seeing it in person, and I said I teach school, and I've shown my kids the what is AFL video that's on YouTube, and they'll come into class in the morning, and there's usually a game on the television in my room, or AFL 360 is wrapping up, because I've got it on in the morning when I get to my classroom. So I've got some kids who have begun getting interested in the game. The principal at my school has become a huge fan of the game over the last couple of years. So I've brought one on board. So I'm getting there. But it's a a beautiful game to watch. It's a beautiful game to watch, and I was wondering, since you've been to a grand final, if you had the opportunity to book the musical act at a grand final, who would you book?
Ooh, I have no idea. That would take me. I'd have to really think about that long and hard.
I know it would not be. I know it wouldn't be Meatloaf.
I think that's a fair bet. I've seen some real horrible acts, and not just at the grand final, but the Super Bowl and other stuff.
Right.
But it seems to be this thing about big events that they have to have overproduced, events, and they're spectacles, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But if you ask me from, say, 15 years ago, I'd have probably said, if it was an Australian act, it would have been Cold Chisel.
Okay.
But I don't know who I'd pick today. Haven't really thought about that. So yeah, I'm gonna take a pass on the question, not because I don't want to answer it, because I really have no idea.
Okay. Now I did a little bit of reading on, and I saw online that you are a retired aerospace engineer.
Yes.
Is that correct? So
that is correct.
It's that has to be a fascinating career in and of itself. I served when I was in the Navy. I served in a couple different aviation squadrons. So are there programs that you're allowed to talk about that you were involved in, or is that all hush hush? At different times I did have secret clearances and things for various projects, but
I spent the bulk of my career working on the space shuttle program.
Wow.
And I also worked on some military aircraft, including the B-1 bomber and some others. And
you dropped out right after you dropped out right after you said B-1 bomber
on the space shuttle.
Okay. Yeah, you dropped out right after the B-1 bomber.
And some other military programs I can't talk about.
Okay. No, I'm not prying. I'm not I certainly get it.
It's fine.
But that had to be fascinating work to be able to be able to look at things that you see in the news, or you watch a shuttle launch and you go, I had something to do with that.
It's a very satisfying feeling when something you've worked on flies and works. I did a lot of different things in my aerospace career, but I have to say that I found the people I worked with to be an incredibly talented group of people who work very hard. And I don't, after retirement, I can tell you, I didn't miss the hours and the long days. I don't miss a lot of other things. I miss the people I work with and the challenge of coming in every day and figuring out how to solve a problem. But yeah, I've done that. And in retirement, I've done a variety of other things. So it's been good, because I took an early retirement.
Okay. And you've got one heck of a hobby that you're doing here with with AFANA as well. I mean, that's that is a labor of love for you. I think I can say.
It has been. I don't do near as much as I did probably 10, 15 years ago. In that, I've gradually handed more and more pieces off to other people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well,
AF is a great group of fans, and they do great work.
Yeah. So if a fan wants to find your website, where would they go about doing that?
Okay. Afana.com.
Okay, afana.com. AFANA.com. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you for this last hour. I want to thank my guest, Rob de Santos, for coming on the podcast. This has been very insightful. I had no idea just how involved you were. In terms of trying to get this game on television here much more widespread. I mean, it's impressive that you have those connections to try to bring this game to fans here, to get them exposed to it. So it's very it's wonderful that you and your organization are putting forth the effort to do that sort of thing, because we're thankful for it, because we're getting to enjoy this fantastic game as a result of your effort. So thank you very much for that, sir.
Well, and thank you for having me on, and I hope that your listeners will gain a little more insight into the the footy world here. And
I'm sorry.
We're at a crossroads. We've come a long way.
Okay.
A long way, and I think that the future's promising.
Okay. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you, who do you have playing in the grand final?
I'm gonna say Port Adelaide and Richmond.
Okay.
I think Port Adelaide and Richmond are probably the favorites from my standpoint.
Okay.
But there's at least three other teams that I think have a shot if they if things go their way.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think it's going to be a great finals. It was great that they 8 out of the 9 games in the last round actually had an impact on the finals. So I thought that was great planning, if you will, on behalf of the AFL, getting that schedule set up. So again, thank you very much, sir, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Craig, and hope your listeners enjoy the footy the rest of the way.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Rob de Santos of AFANA.com, or AFANA, for being my guest in episode 50. This was truly an enjoyable interview. One cannot deny Mr. de Santos' passion for the game, and you can't deny his passion for the work and effort that he's put forth in the last couple of decades to bring this wonderful game of footy to as many of us here in North America. His work is integral in allowing so many of us to see this wonderful game and be exposed to it, and to become fans, and to work towards bringing more and more footy to us here in the States on as widespread a basis as possible. So a big hat tip to Mr. de Santos and the other people from AFANA for doing that very thing. Now, if you're a footy fan here in the United States, just wanted to let you know that AFANA, as he had mentioned, they do take donations to help defray their operating costs. So there is a link on their website, which I will put in the show notes. If you are interested in putting forth a donation to them, I'm sure they would greatly appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, as the first round of finals begins here in a couple of days, I'm hoping to hear from some of you about your thoughts about finals footy. My hope is that some of you will take a moment, and consider taking a moment or two, and create an audio file that you'll send to me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com, or as a DM to yank_on. I'm hoping to hear from some of the listeners of the podcast about their greatest finals memories. Maybe it was sitting around the television with family members, watching your first finals that you remember. Maybe it was your team winning the finals for the first time in your lifetime. I would love to hear your story, all right? I would also love to use those clips in an upcoming episode as we roll into these finals here. So as we're going through the finals, and I'm giving you my tips for the finals games as we go along here over the next few weeks, I'd like to sprinkle some of these audio files in as we go along. So I would love to hear from you. I think I've had one so far that was sent to me. So Again, if you'd like to DM me on Twitter, you can do it at yank_on, or you can reach me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. Again, like I said, one of these, the goals that I have with the podcast is to learn more about the history of the game, and your stories will most certainly do that. Please make sure that you include your name, and it could be just your first name, where you're from, and which club you support. Again, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I would truly appreciate it, and I know that fans here in the States and even fans around Australia and around the world would love to hear your story. So, ladies and gents, don't forget, if you'd like to sign up for the mailing list, where you get the podcast sent to you as immediately as it comes out, there's a link for that in the show notes. I'd love to have you sign up. I've now close to 24 people who have signed up for that, so it's creeping up there slowly but surely. Also, if you have an idea for a show topic, or someone that you know, or maybe it's even yourself that you think would be a great guest on the show, as I'm going to be working towards more interviews once the season winds down, feel free to drop me a DM on Twitter, or shoot me an email at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. I will reach out back to you and get in touch with you. I have several irons in the fire with regards to interviews that I'm looking forward to doing. I just received an email today from somebody who's a longtime Port Adelaide fan who wants to come on, and I'm looking forward to setting up a time to talk with him. And don't forget, ladies and gents, that while you can find all the episodes of this podcast at ayankonthefooty.podbean.com, you can also find it on your favorite podcast provider. We're now also on Amazon Music as well. So if you happen to have Amazon Music, you can find my podcast there as well. Now that you've listened, I would hope that you'd consider giving a review on Apple Podcasts. Lets me know what I need to work on, what I'm doing well, and lets the podcast host know what you think of the show. And it might move me up the charts a little bit and make mine a little bit easier to find for more people to listen to. And don't forget that you can reach me at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com and on Twitter at yank_on, as well as on Facebook and Instagram at ayankonthefooty. I'd also like to thank Mr. Joseph McDade for the use of a couple pieces of his great music. I'm using the pieces Elevation and Backplate. And Mr. McDade's created some fantastic music. You can find his work at josephmcdade.com/music. He is also on Spotify. I would imagine he's probably on Apple Music as well as Amazon Music as well. I don't have either of those services, so I can't check that. Mr. McDade, again, thanks very much for your hard work and your wonderful music. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening, because while we're fans of our teams, deep down we're fans of the game that we all love, and that's the game of footy. And for those of you who are here in the U.S., 3 of the 4 first-round final games will be on free television here in the U.S. So they're going to all be on FS2. The only game that's not going to be aired locally or in the States, I should say, it's going to be on Fox Soccer Plus. If you happen to have that, you can still watch it. But the only one of the 4 that's not being broadcast here on free television is Brisbane and Richmond. Okay? And remember, don't forget that Australian rules football. It's why they invented the DVR. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening. I ask that you consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. And may your dribble kick never hit the post. I'll catch you later. This has been episode 50 of A Yank on the Footy, my interview with Afana.com founder, Rob de Santos. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on or at ayankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at A Yank on the Footy. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening, and please consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. I will be back in a couple of days with my opening round of the finals tips. Looking forward to getting that to you. Goodbye.